how pleased and proud I am to be able to come here today in front of all the current A Battery soldiers. A Battery was my home for 18 months out of the 24 months National Service training period. I had served in the CMF, the reserves, prior to coming into National Service, expecting to be called up, and I thought the 2 years part-time service would treat me and my twin brother well, and recruit training would be made a hell of a lot easier knowing the drills. It was certainly tough. Anyway, they had to sort the good from the bad. A Battery came into my life. I remember marching into A Battery with another handful of National Servicemen who just finished training at 123 Battery down at Holsworthy. We also had regular Army soldiers, Kevin Mobbs over here, and Dave Pearson, Dave Horn, and a few others joined us on the train trip up to Townsville from Sydney, a 2-night trip, and we got fronted in front of the BSM up at Townsville. We walked into the office, and the first thing he said to me was, "I know you're going to Gibson, don't I?" I said, "Yes, you do, sir, from 121 training, light anti-aircraft battery in Darwin." Arthur Bretherton was his name, and he had run an advanced gunnery course for the bombardiers up there. And so Arthur had the uncanny knack of telling myself and my twin brother apart very easily. My grandmother couldn't do that. And so we had a bit of a think about it. We said, what the hell's he up to? How's he telling us so easily? We worked out it was our watch bands. We had different coloured watch bands. And anyway, we decided to change the watch bands over. And Arthur didn't get us. It's the last time we ever did that. Never again. So anyway, when I marched into the office with the other guys in Townsville, he asked me where my twin brother was, and I said, Peter's at the School of Artillery at Manly. He's doing a signals course, and he will be here in another week or so. Not to bloody A Battery, he's not, was Arthur's reply. And Peter went off to Headquarter Battery, never to be seen on the A Battery lines. Before I get into a bit about what we did in Vietnam and the book that I wrote on it, I'd just like to thank a few people. Paul from the A Battery Association, thanks very much for what you did organising today with Aaron. Thanks, Aaron, we really do appreciate it. And you don't know how pleased the veterans here are to come back here today. I do have a celebrity of sorts in the audience. Our BC at the time was a Major Tony Williams, a retired colonel now. And thanks very much for coming, Tony. Tony took us through a pretty rigorous training period for 10 to 12 months up in Townsville. He was responsible for taking a gun battery to Vietnam to be able to do its job in support of the 3rd Battalion. It was our direct fire support battalion. We spent a lot of time up in high range, building fire support bases, learning the guns, learning how to operate the guns, doing this job, doing that job, and if anyone wasn't quite up to it, they went to another area or got kicked out of the battery fairly quickly, and we became very proficient at what we did. You couldn't tell Nashos from regulars, we're all the same, we all wore the same uniform. We had a bit of a joke at calling the regulars lifers, and they had a bit of a joke calling us Nashos. So other than that, that's as far as we've got. We're all soldiers in the Australian Army, we're all in artillery, and more importantly, we're all in A Battery. The other thing I forgot to mention when Arthur was telling me my brother wasn't coming to A Battery was he saw our lanyards on the right-hand shoulder just coming up from 123 Battery. Get those bloody lanyards on the right side, you guys. So off they came and over to the left-hand side, and we were very, very proud to be part of A Battery. He told us then that A Battery is the best. You have to give your best at all times, and that's what we tried to do. At the end of the book, and I'll go into this a bit later on, I asked did we do our job in Vietnam, and I'll give you some response to what people did. We got to Vietnam, we settled in the lines there and did some training missions, and then we went out and started what we went to Vietnam to do, was to support the 3rd Battalion. The 3rd Battalion arrived a couple of weeks after us. We'd acclimatised and fired a few training rounds, fired a few missions for other battalions. The 3rd Battalion was sent out to a fairly quiet part of the Phuoc Tuy province, which is what the Australians operated in. And they said, we go out there, you'll do a few days training, get your land legs going. You're going to do some acclimatisation with the armoured guys with the tanks and the APCs, and then you can start your operation. Anyway, the first night out, the company, D Company, I think it was hit very hard. They walked into an area that was known to have been a very large VC area. The intelligence people had thought that they'd moved on, but they hadn't. They got very close to the Australian lines. Fortunately, they were in shell scrapes. Satchel charges thrown in and killed one of the 3rd Battalion 2nd Lieutenants, Andy McCann. Where Andy? He was there that night, and we had 3 guns stationed at Nui Dat, and we had 3 guns out at Fire Support Base Marge. In those days, the Australians had withdrawn a battalion in November 1970, the 8th Battalion, and they weren't replaced. It just meant that the 2 battalions remaining in Vietnam had a lot more work to do, a lot more area to cover, and it meant the gun batteries were separated into 2 sections of 3 guns, and away we went. So 3 guns were out at Bet. That was the first support base we occupied. I was out there on that thing, and Arthur Breathitt, God love him, said, Gunner Gibson, come back in, you're going down to Vung Tau on 3 days R&C. I was very, very happy with that. If you know what Vung Tau is about, if you think of Sodom and Gomorrah, you're probably getting very close to it. Anyway, the first night I was in, I just got off the chopper, and I walked in, had my dinner, and got into our lines, which are right next to where the guns were. And all of a sudden, a fire mission was called, and Barry Smith's Alpha gun was the closest to me, and they were preparing illumination rounds to fire in support of this beleaguered company out in the bush. Anyway, over the next 8 or 9 hours, we fired the 3 guns fired 800 illumination rounds in support of the platoons out there. I can remember going over and offering my service to Sergeant Barry Smith. He said, "Good on you, Gibbo." He said, "You can help out on the sides." And I think I replaced Steve-O here at one stage. Laurie Cristani was on the other side. The guy who was the champion at the moment was our loader, a National Service gunner called Reg McGorry. And Reg could load around like nobody could. It was a fist and up the spout, and the number 2 would close the breach. Reg's knuckles were bare, raw and bleeding at the end of the night. Crash here was loading fuses, or setting the fuse settings on the illumination rounds, and as I say, we 3 guns fired 800 rounds of illumination. The guns out at Fire Support Base Marge couldn't fire at HE for the start of the mission because the VC were too close. They were right on the belt straps of the 3RA guys. And in the book, I do describe the actions of one of the FO signals there, a guy by the name of David Chalk. And David has written his words on what he went through that night, being in that experience. So if you want to buy the book, you'll be able to read all about that. And they will be up for sale here later on before you budget. From there, we just did our business. We went around and we created fire support bases, Marge, Beth and a few others, and fired, as I say, generally in support of the 3rd Battalion. In June 1971, an operation was planned, a task force operation was planned, and that was called Operation Overlord because it was going to start on the 6th of June. The SAS patrols up to the very north of our province had found large trails of recent movement by large numbers of troops, obviously enemy troops, and they said this should be investigated. The province north of us was Long Khan province, had been operated mainly by the Americans, but they were withdrawing, and so they left the operations of the southern part of that province to the South Vietnamese army. They didn't want to go into their jungle because they knew it was there. We didn't know it was there, and we're about to find out with drastic results. Before I read a passage from the book, I'll just set up what happened there. On the 5th of June, A Battery, 3 guns moved out of Nui Dat, and we've created Fire Support Base Pamela. 3 guns, the other section, were at Fire Support Base Iggy. They were air moved in to Pamela, and we very quickly built the support base, put plenty of barbed wire up, put our claymore mains out, listening posts out. You could just tell that there was something in the area that wasn't right. And I'd been out on a listening post with Gunner Gordon Bright, Ultra we used to call him, yeah. And we both said to each other coming in, the hair on the back of our heads was sticking out. We said, there's something out there, and we didn't know what, but we had a fair idea what it was. So we moved in. 104 battery had 3 guns at fire support base Trish, not far away. The Americans had 3 155mm howitzers at fire support base Sherry, not far away also. And so we had 12 guns ready to go. We had the mortar platoon from 3 RAR all laid on, ready to hit. And the idea was that the 3rd Battalion were to push through this area, and they were to push whatever was there onto 4 RAR New Zealand, a New Zealand company too, and also an American battalion. They were waiting in blocking positions to capture whatever was, or to take on whatever we were pushing forward. That was a setup for what was about to happen. 6th of June, D-Day, anniversary, Operation Overlord. We moved forward. Our FO parties were with the infantry. The tanks were further to the north with another company of 3 RAR. APCs were there, so we had the whole gamut of arms ready to take on whatever we found. We didn't do much firing early in the day. Late in the afternoon, almost on dusk, 5 Platoon B Company 3 RAR with Lance Bombardier Peter Marr, Bluey, and Gunner Bain Kelly, Gus, were with 5 Platoon, understrength platoon, and they contacted 3 enemy soldiers. Looked like VC, but they weren't sure, so a small contact started. As it was getting fairly dark, Lieutenant Kells, who was in charge of the platoon, decided not to pursue in dark. We didn't know it was there. Bluey Marr then started the battery firing onto that area, and for the rest of the night, telling what A battery did before I get to what the infantry did, they had pulled back into a defensive position about 200 metres from where the contact started. And so the battery, 6 guns, we were firing into that area of the general, not knowing what was there, into the general area where the VC had been seen. During the night, it was a fairly unpleasant night for 5 Platoon. They were a fair way away from the rest of the company, so they were by themselves basically. Our guns fire hopefully kept the VC, and we didn't know the NVA were there, but they were there. It kept them in the bunkers so they couldn't get out and get to the guys on the ground. Lieutenant Kells talked to his OC of the company, and they devised a plan for what would happen the following morning. At around 600 hours the following morning, A battery and 104 battery would do a fire plan of a half an hour onto the target area to soften the area up, and A battery would fire slightly ahead on danger close in front of our troops, and we'd walk those rounds forward of our advancing platoon, which we did. We'd been on the guns a long time at that stage. We needed an ammunition resupply, and as luck would have it, the APC guiding the convoy of ammunition in ran over a mine just outside of our perimeter. Obviously, someone had crept in during the night and put a mine there and caught this APC. It was the 3rd time that particular APC had struck a mine, so he wasn't going out anymore. I think 3rd time was lucky. But anyway, so we fired, and at around 700 hours, the platoon started moving forward into that area where they'd had the contact. They hadn't gone very far when the fusillade of fire hit them. It came from everywhere. And they went to ground immediately, took up a defensive position, and Bluey then adjusted the fire onto where it was coming from, and were able to provide a bit of relief, but they were in serious trouble. The rest of the company, as I said, was still some way away, so Lieutenant Kells organised a defensive position, and that's where they stayed for the next 2 hours before the company were able to catch up and provide some sort of support. They were running low on ammunition, and Bluey and Gus were busy calling in not only our guns but also 104 battery guns, the heavy guns of the Americans, and also the mortar platoon of 3 RAR. We had choppers waiting, and we had some I can't think of the name of them. Australian gunships and the
Bush Rangers.
Yeah, Bush Rangers, what the American ones called, the Cobras, and they were waiting, but they didn't know where the front lines were. So once the platoon caught up, Sergeant Des Fontaines was his surname. he came forward with our FO, Second Lieutenant Ian Mathers, and Gunner Ian Brown. Brownie's here. Where's Brownie? There he is. They came forward and they relieved Gus and Blue and sent them back 40 or so metres, and Ian Mathers came forward to see where the rounds were falling, so he could adjust the rounds onto the targets he thought more accurately. I don't know why he thought that, because Blue was doing a great job. But anyway, Ian had volunteered to come out as an FO. That was his first time out as an FO. He's normally a section commander. I think it was your first time out too, wasn't it, as a FOC? And it was Ian's birthday that day, and he said to Ian Mathers that it's my birthday, and Ian replied to him, it's a bugger of a way to spend your birthday, which it was. Ian had a look. Des Fontaine was standing behind a tree. We had these marker balloons that they put up to mark the front lines, and it meant someone mixing a chemical solution, putting it into the solution, and sending this balloon up into the canopy of the jungle, which was very, very tall, very thick jungle. You couldn't see more than 5 or 6 metres ahead of you. So you can envisage that. The balloon got up through the jungle, and the choppers were then able to find out where our front lines were, and they poured an amazing amount of firepower into the area in front of us, into front of them. Ian Mathers had seen what he wanted to see. Him and Ian were behind this large tree, and they could actually hear the enemy rounds hitting the other side of the tree. So they knew they were in an area of some sort of heavy fire action. They didn't need to know that, they knew it when they got there. Lieutenant Kells, the platoon commander, had warned Ian Mathers that there was a fire lane in front of him. Now, the enemy used to cut from their bunker system a lane like that underneath the jungle, so they could see feet and lower legs coming, but we couldn't see them unless we got down on the ground, and that's why they knew we were there, and that's why their fire was so oppressive against the fire platoon guys. Ian had seen what he wanted to see. He was lifting himself up on his knees to turn back to go back, and as he did, he was struck in the chest by multiple rounds and was killed. Brown here moved him back out of the fire lane, dragged him back out of the way. Bluey Ma and Gus came forward again to take over the fire, and that's what happened. We were firing there for the next number of hours. I'd like to read a passage from the book by Gus Kelly. He was the FO signature Bluey, and if you can just bear with me for a few minutes, I'll read what he's got to say. He describes how this sergeant for the platoon got this chemical reaction going to get the balloon up into the jungle top so we could see where it was going. He says, by now our air support consisted of 2 Huey Bushrangers, and they were from the 9th Squadron Royal Australian Air Force, and 2 US Cobra gunships. The amount of firepower they provided was extraordinary. The fire platoon had been in contact on its own for about 3 hours when company headquarters and 4 platoon joined the fray. Ian Mathers and Ian Brown, Tony Pearce moved to our location, and Blue commenced briefing Ian Mathers as to the plan that he'd been forming. It was hard to communicate because of the intense noise and the amount of incoming fire from the bunker system. The changeover from one call sign to another was completed. Bluey and I moved to a position approximately 20 metres from call sign 12. That was Second Lieutenant Mathers. About half an hour in our new position, word came through that Ian Mathers had been hit by small arms fire, and all fire control would resort back to Blue. Luckily, he was all over the fire missions and literally took over firing the same corrections. As my role was becoming superfluous, Blue was I can't believe I said that word. Blue was talking to about 5 different groups: artillery, mortars, gunships. It would have been pointless issuing double fire orders. Communications were good. I felt I could offer some assistance to the deteriorating situation on the ground. Ammunition was in short supply and needed to be moved to the forward sections. Maybe we could be of assistance to the wounded, of which now there were 5 diggers, all needing to be moved by dust-off. I now moved back to our previous position where Ian Mathers lay. It was confirmed that he was killed in action, and we moved his body to the rear position. A helicopter resupply was on its way from Nui Dat, laden with much needed ammunition. and as it approached the drop area laden with approximately 2,000 rounds of 7.62 ammunition, it appeared to veer to the starboard side. It was hovering above our position, attempting to find a safe drop-off position, as the ammunition was very heavy. I noted that the pad master from 3 RAR, who was on board the chopper, had fallen from the Huey, falling about 20 metres, badly injuring himself. I would assess that falling through the thick canopy had broken many bones in his lower body, and I was astounded that he survived the fall. Normally the crew of the choppers were attached to a monkey wire which retracted back into the craft if they fell. The pad master, Jim Griffiths, obviously did not have this connected for whatever reason. He was evacuated back to Australia with multiple broken limbs, and he spent around 12 months in hospital before he was able to get out again. As the helicopter struck the canopy, it reminded me of looking under a lawnmower. The blades started to mangle in the trees and started to break up. This was all happening close to our position like a slow-moving motion movie. The door gunner on the starboard side fell from the chopper. Unfortunately, his monkey wire worked correctly, but he was retracted. The line got twisted in the skid as it hit the ground and burst into flames, and Corporal David Dubber was incinerated in the wreck. A few of us got to the chopper and removed the pilot, Flight Lieutenant Everett Lance, who had been killed in the crash. The co-pilot jumped from the chopper with such haste that he headed towards the enemy before being tackled by five platoon soldiers. Heavens knows what would have happened if he kept going. The other door gunner appeared to have a badly broken shoulder, but luckily survived. The battle raged on to approximately 1600 hours when 2 Centurion tanks were called into the battle. I never understood why they didn't arrive earlier. They moved into the bunker system to run over the slender buildings. At 50 tonnes, they levelled the area very quickly. The Centurions were on their way to relieve 5 Platoon, but they got stuck in their own battle. They got into a bunker system they didn't know was there, and RPGs were fired them left, right and centre, and they had to fight their own fight, which took their time and delayed them getting down to the fire platoon. The OC of the Centurion tank squadron actually knew Lieutenant Curls, and he said to him on the radio, "We're coming to get you, we're coming to get you." And then, as I say, the tanks got struck themselves. By late afternoon on the 7th of June, 4, 5, 6 platoons started moving through the bunker system. I was surprised as to how large the area was. There was much evidence that a large number of enemy troops had been stationed here, with the remains of supplies, training rooms, hospital supplies and discarded uniforms everywhere. As a group, we were now exhausted after a couple of days with no sleep and much adrenaline. It was now time to calm down. D Company had surrounded the enemy position and we could finally stand down. The FO party had done a great job. Ian Brown, Tony Pearce and I acted as extra infantry soldiers and assisting with ammunition resupply and tending to the wounded. Blue Umar was exceptional in tending to all fire missions of the day without a break and liaising with all various units of artillery, mortars and gunships. Blue did an amazing job and deserved all the accolades he received. He was awarded a military medal. Gus Kelly was awarded an American decoration, military medal with Valour. He didn't know about it for about 12 or 14 years. He'd been recommended by the Americans and for what he did. And the medal actually lay in someone's drawer at the Honours and Awards Director in Canberra for about 15 years before it was found. And they got in touch with Gus, and by then the Australian Army guys were able to accept foreign awards. We couldn't accept them up till in the mid-80s when they did a review of foreign awards. Gus did accept it. Tony Williams was there with Greg Laird and the 2 guys from the battalion, company battalion area, Major Kells and the Cahill, Ivan Cahill was. Carl was he was the commanding officer of B Company. So they were all there with the American ambassador, and Gus proudly received his award, and rightly so. Unfortunately, back in those days, we operated under the imperial system of honours and awards, and people who did supreme things weren't recognised because there weren't enough medals allotted to a unit to go around. Even in the 6th Battalion, the D Company at Long Tan, they had the same problem. If they gave out too many awards now, what happens if we have another Long Tan 3 months down the track and someone else did something, we have nothing left in the bag. It was a terrible system, and when I worked at Caro, or at Schema as it became, we had part to do with the moving from the Imperial Awards to the Australian Honours Award system, and by then anyone who should have been recognised was recognised. They did have an end of war list Vietnam back in the late 80s, early 90s, where people who had been recommended and weren't given awards were finally recognised with an Australian award through the Honours and Award system. So the book tells much more detail. I hope you get to read it. We'll certainly be giving a copy to the BC. And as I say, there'll be copies down here. My good lady Rita down front here, if anyone wants to purchase a copy, they are available, and they'll help pay for our accommodation. I did not realise there was a rugby fest on here over the weekend, and our hotel room was very sufficient, I must admit.
Oh.
So, look, I'd like now to, one last thing. I asked the question at the back of the book, did A Battery do its job in Vietnam? And it's a question that I can't answer. I don't think any of us in the battery can answer that because we were in the battery. But Colonel Scott, who was the CO of 3RAR, the battalion we supported, wrote these remarks at a reunion that he was unable to attend, and he wrote them to Dave Jackson. The support you gave the members of Old Faithful during the many engagements we were involved in was great. To know you were always ready and able to give such accurate and sustained fire support at all hours of the day and night was very comforting. This was especially so during Operation Long Khan Overlord in June 1971, when we needed your support more than any other time. 7 June will remain in our memories for a long time to come. We infantrymen were very relieved to know we had such dedicated gunners in support for such a long engagement. I think that just about answers it. I'd like now Paul from the Battery Association to come forward. Aaron, if you'd like to come forward, and Tony, if you'd like to come forward. Can I have those books on the... Aaron, thank you for allowing us to be here today. And you don't know how much it means to our guys, and we really do appreciate it to be home, because this was our home for a long time. I'd like to present you with a book for your battery and a book for the CO of the regiment, and I hope you enjoy the read. Thanks very much for having us here. Absolutely. Thank you. Our old BC, Tony Williams. Tony's trained as hard, as I said. I remember at a reunion we went to in Canberra at the opening of the Vietnam Memorial in Canberra in about 93, I think it was, 92, 93. One of the gunners, Bernie McMarron, and he was the gunner who found that your telephone at Townsville had an STD thing we could call interstate. And we always volunteered to do cleaning up duties after hours, because we'd get into the BC's office, clean it, then sit behind his desk on the floor, and we could ring home free of charge. So it was a keenly sought position. So he was the man. So thanks for that. Thanks for looking after us so well, and thanks for bringing us home.